Well, good morning and welcome to today's session. My name is Robert Hudman from Knight Solutions, and it's great to be here at Groundbreak 2021. For those of you watching locally here in Australia, it's obviously early, so I hope you have a cup of coffee in hand ready to go. Before we jump in and go through things, we're just going to show you a forward-looking statement. So welcome to our session today on getting your smarts up front for the benefit of the quality delivery framework. I'm joined today by Matthew Hickey, who works with us here at Knight Solutions. Knight Solutions is focused on delivering value for Procore customers, both new and existing, as a Procore certified consultant, really making sure that our customers get the most value possible out of Procore. And Matt, I know we talk about quality, we talk about technology, we talk about how to sort of really enable construction every day. Yeah, great to have you here with us. We have these conversations often, but glad to be focused here on quality. So tell us a bit about yourself, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, mate. So look, I've spent about 12 months working with Rob at Knight Solutions now, and come across from the mainstream sort of construction management, commercial management, operations management scene for a sort of mid-tier construction level in Queensland. Yeah, most of my roles in the past have been pretty heavily focused on systems and QA, so I have built a bit of a passion for it, and
Great.
Just recently pivoted, I suppose, over into this into this scene in the industry, and loving every minute of it, Rob. So it's yeah, it's great to connect the passion with what I'm actually doing now.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, well, good to have you with us. So we've got a nice, simple, but really focused agenda today. So again, we're going to really look at quality, how to apply it, developing quality mastery. We're going to go through a specific agenda to achieve that, and really give you guys some recommendations. So a bit of a check-in on the quality of state of affairs in Australia and where it's sitting at the moment. Then taking that as a bit of a launching pad and looking at how we can go beyond the regulations and processes and really starting to build that quality application directly into construction. We're going to look at a specific case study as well, one actually that Matt was involved with delivery when he was in construction. So it'd be an early contractor involvement, or what's known as ECI model, and look at some value and quality management aspects of that. And then closing out with a conclusion. So some really takeaways that are practical. Let's jump in, start with number one, state of affairs. So where are we at with quality in construction, specifically in Australia? And I think we can definitely look to Australia as a bit of a leading area in quality and safety and other aspects as well. So I'm going to throw a number up on screen. It's a fairly blunt number. 85% of residential apartment buildings have at least one defect across multiple locations. So not just one defect, but multiple ones across the building works itself. What are your thoughts on this, Matt, when you see this number, and what do you think?
Yeah, look, it's a big number. It's hard to doubt that 85% of the time we're making a mistake more than once, which is it is a big number. It's pretty hard for the people that are living in those buildings. They I suppose when there's multiple repeated defects, you're getting multiple repeated displacements of people's living arrangements when it's got to be fixed, and it just compounds up. So I suppose residential apartments where you've got multi-level construction, it can really have a big impact on the end users. So I can sort of see why the situation in Australia at the moment has really prompted the reform of this whole system. I suppose, multi-level construction, it lends itself to, either recurring good quality construction or recurring quality issues. You don't set it right to start with. It's pretty much logical that you're going to make the same mistake over and over again when you're repeating the same type of construction level by level. So yeah, look, I am quite alarmed with that figure. Every time I see it, it still amazes me that it's that high, to be honest, but it's good that it's prompted the reform. So I suppose putting my builder's hat on, everyone that I've worked with in my career, well, look, most people, not everyone, but most people out there, they actually do want to do a good job. And that goes from, upper levels of management, different stakeholders, government entities, everything like that, right through to the people that are actually doing the work on the ground. People naturally want to do a good job. I haven't found many people that would admit otherwise. So I suppose you can only write it down to, do they have the know-how Do they then have the right toolkit to do the job, and do they have the capacity to do it? That always seems to be the question that I ask, and I'd say a lot of the time it's a bit of a mixture. So we're going to sort of work through those notions a little bit more sort of shortly.
Awesome. Well, why don't we let you continue those points, and let's throw up the iron triangle, which
Yep.
we're all familiar with, certainly well beyond construction. The old adage of the time, cost, and quality
Yeah.
balance. I think that's a really important piece. We've thrown safety there in the middle for an important reason, to make a bit of a parallel between it. But continue on the points you said, Matt. What are your thoughts around balancing those aspects, and how do we look to safety as guidance?
Look, safety is obviously a big thing here in Australia. It's heavily legislated. It's at the forefront all the time of the focus on a building site, and so it should be. I mean, you don't do safety right, people get hurt, people get killed. It's as simple as that. So looking at that iron triangle, I think realistically safety does sit in there, and it might not be just a straight triangle anymore. So when I look at those other ones, time, cost, and quality, it's the iron triangle. It's been around forever. Everyone that's in any type of sort of project management role would have seen this before, and probably had to juggle these drivers. So nowadays, here in Australia, the aspect of safety is, if not the heaviest of those drivers. Safety is high immediate risk. If something goes wrong in safety, big impact, and immediate impact, when someone gets hurt. So when it comes to, I suppose, trying to balance these drivers, safety probably pulls rank most of the time. Big impact, big consequences, I suppose. So yeah, balancing those is really probably an art form, I'd say. When you look at project management and the key concepts of project management, one of the main things is the ability to manage expectations around those drivers. And what it says to me is what's needed in amongst all that is a bit of a framework of how you make decisions, because every time anybody working on a building site needs to make a decision about something, there's going to be impacts on all those different aspects. So yeah, a project manager's role is pretty important in this, and I think most people can probably resonate with the different pressures that come with these drivers. So is it all balanced at the moment? Obviously not, because the quality is really lacking. I mean, our safety is great. I would say across the industry, time and cost, not too sure. That's the commerciality of a project. Every company is probably different. Every job site is probably different, but quality is one thing that seems to come through as it varies drastically between different projects, and that's probably what we need to focus on, is bringing the standard up a bit.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, my observations, I agree with everything you said there, in fact. But issues around construction companies, or the construction process overall, the overall industry. I mean, it's running very lean. It seems to get leaner and leaner, and there's kind of expectations that may be somewhat unrealistic. Trying to have the fastest built project at the lowest cost with the highest quality. I think there's definitely those expectation settings that you mentioned there. But for me, safety is just become so entrenched in a good way that it's a kind of non-negotiable. But like you said, it does tend to pull rank, and what's it going to pull rank from? Unfortunately, sometimes that is quality. And I think that the commerciality you touched upon, time and cost, they tend to be the sort of fundamental drivers overall.
And they seem to be the objectives that are at the forefront in the planning phase. Time and cost. Time and cost is always important. When it comes to the delivery phase of a job, it's just assumed that safety will be perfect and quality will be perfect. But it takes a bit more than that. Yeah, assumptions definitely. That's a great point. That might be a key underlying issue. So let's jump in and kind of just have a quick snapshot of moving forward from there, and the concept of we have these regulations. They're obviously important and necessary. They may evolve, change, strengthen, spread, whatever the case is. But starting to look at the concept, coming back to the title of this session today, looking at mastery and what that's going to be achieved based upon, and our view is really having the smarts up front. So
not just assuming quality will happen and not just assuming that everyone's going to do the job correctly on an individual level, or the coordination between multiple people. We came up with kind of 4 ideas around a quality assurance framework. Can you walk us through those, Matt, and just explain a little bit about each?
I suppose I've worked through this enough times to see the common themes, and it always comes back to what I believe is sort of 4 main key areas. So, understanding the rules to start with. There's always boundaries especially in construction industry. It's very heavily legislated. We're talking code compliance, Australian standards. You're also talking things like project-specific boundaries in terms of quality. So, understanding the rules is key. And it's not just understanding the rules, what they were 5 years ago and doing nothing about it. It's understanding the rules as they change as well. Second, I think stakeholder collaboration, really important. Making sure that the objectives of the different project stakeholders are known and are documented, not just assumed, and then everyone, I suppose, is working subjectively on the decisions they make around quality. It does need to be documented. It does need to flow into the day-to-day processes and tools that the people use on site. So that leads into the plan itself, having a logical, intuitive plan that works, it's thought out, it shows you how to get from A to B and so on. Lastly, I'd say control is the big one. Probably where we've seen a lot of issues in the flesh down around apartment buildings and defects is probably a lack of control.
Yeah, and I think what I'm saying here generally, sometimes it takes, certain events. We had it in the past with safety. We're seeing it now with quality to kind of spur the industry on. But I think that the industry overall is becoming much more proactive in the quality sense, in terms of an overall objective and wanting to achieve it. I think that the complication, the confusion, the misunderstanding is all right. We're going to shoot for addressing these quality items, but it's the kind of how. It's how we get there. What are the tools and mechanisms and processes? So if we're looking at a trajectory towards the concept of mastering quality or quality mastery, we talked about the standardized framework, and that's really important. So we have the regulations, we have the traditional Australian standards, building codes. Every country has similar things. And I think everyone's pretty well versed in that. I think there definitely could be some ongoing continuing education there. That's definitely something that's been around for a while and fairly well established. But I think the next step before we kind of head towards, on the path to getting that quality mastery is bringing in tools. And one of them for me is technology. I often have conversations with clients when they come on board or when they're thinking about it, and I make it very clear that, buying a technology product, be it Procore or something else, that is simply a tool to achieve an outcome. It is not the solution itself. It's the equivalent of a carpenter going out and buying the best hammer they can. It's not going to make them a better carpenter at the end of the day.
Exactly,
It's all about using that tool in the correct way and being smart about it. But I think a lack of those tools and technology is definitely something that's holding it back. And I think people, definitely the customers we speak to have a very strong appetite for it. But then how do they actually use it and apply it? And that's obviously where we come in, a lot of context or best practice and that sort of stuff as well. So, but I think making those tools and technologies available, making sure that people then know not just what tools and technology are there, but then how to use it and how to apply it. Once we have that, from my perspective, there needs to be somewhat of a cultural shift as well. I think coming back to some of your points, one of the biggest ones that resonates for me is having the plan and also stakeholder engagement. I think there's too much of an assumption, which we've moved away from in safety, where we know safety will be done and we can sort of fairly well assume to some degree, but there's too much of an assumption on quality that it just will happen somehow magically. And I think that a cultural shift and any blockers in that culture that, taking pride in your work and giving people the opportunity to show that with a framework and a process is really important. So what are your thoughts on that sort of path towards quality mastery, Matt?
Yeah, look, I agree with what you said there, Rob. And just on that last point you made about around stakeholder engagement, what I see time and time again is an underlying almost an unspoken expectation that every builder out there is going to build the best quality bit of gear around. Like that, I see it time and time again. It's written into contracts, it's written into specifications that there's this overarching, you need to basically build the highest quality, best product. Even in an event where there's something not even documented around it, you have basically got to do it to the best standard. And probably what does need to balance out is consideration that obviously it affects time and cost. So definitely that engagement up front and open forum sort of discussion around, if we do want good quality outcomes on a project, let's actually work through what it's going to take to do it. So I suppose this type of framework of mastery, it takes a bit of planning, like we said, getting the plan and the processes in place, getting the tools. We are fortunate to work with some really, really sort of innovative and sort of state-of-the-art tools around quality management. And it's really quite refreshing being able to see when someone's given the right tool to achieve an outcome, their eyes light up. It's positive validation of someone that's done a good job, instead of just nothing said about the good work and only the flags getting thrown up when someone hasn't done the right thing. So that's what these tools really do allow, is real transparency around data, and it gets people going. I see it all the time. It really does start to connect with people that, you look at something like an ITP, bit of paper sitting in someone's car that might get signed off at the end, all overdue, and they sort of go, yeah, I think it was all done, and they sign it off. Whereas now we look at the tools out there to deal with that function, and people can actually positively see all the good work that they've done as it happens. It's quite refreshing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think sometimes the time and cost aspects, especially of construction, sometimes hinder the ability of what is fundamentally, and sometimes or often gets forgotten, that construction and all the different trades and specialities involved, it is a craft. It is built by hand fundamentally. So I think if we can have that ability for them to have those tools and support and processes and plans, it kind of opens them up or frees them up to really explore and showcase that craft. And coming back to your point, most people, let's say almost all, and again, I haven't met anyone who doesn't care, take great pride in their work. And if they have ways to do that easily and more focus on delivering that, but that's going to raise the quality standard itself, which I think is really important. So,
yeah.
Really curious, you had a case study, Matt, we want to jump into around early contractor involvement. I know I've asked you to talk a fair bit already today, but it'd be great for you to kind of walk us through your experience with how quality can be engaged in a process and a delivery framework like early contractor involvement, and your experience with it.
Sure.
I'll leave it to you, Matt. It's definitely an area of expertise, especially around the QA as well. But just walk us through us, and it'd be great to get your insights.
So probably just one key point from what we were just talking about to keep in mind here are the tools and the data. There's been a real lag, I think, in the industry around how data is collected and used. So one key point to remember when we start talking about this ECI model is the ability to recall data and look at trends. It's really important. It's actually key to be able to effectively run an ECI model. So just on that, so an ECI, early contractor involvement, I suppose by definition, there's lots of different ways of putting it, but my definition of an ECI is a model that engages a builder for a fee upfront to provide input and experience around those early stages of design. What it also allows is some early input on procurement and market testing and things like that, all before they're awarded an actual build contract. So essentially you're getting the builder's head up front before, say, a client has to commit to actually doing it. It basically promotes a collaborative approach up front. So I'm just going to work through a little bit of the detail. I suppose I mentioned the builder's head. So when an ECI model is put in place, a builder gets involved very early in the piece to do things like design reviews, even a little bit of feasibility stuff when it comes to value management. But essentially, they're going to let you know as you're working through the planning of the job, what works and what doesn't from a builder's perspective. That's something that's often missed, and all the builders out there will know that when they're not involved early in the design phase, they'll get to the delivery phase and no doubt they'll pull a design apart and go, all of these things don't work. And all that does is sort of slow the process down, cost more money. So it's a big tick there. Getting the builder's head involved early is from what I've seen, has massive benefits. With that, it increases the speed. So, there's obviously a big focus on speed and timing. Went from, say, a developer's perspective that, has a funding model that has certain requirements and certain dates that they've got to hit. Speed's big. What an ECI does is gets the thought process happening, and it can actually allow a separated sort of early works type component to start being built while the real thought's still going into all of the latter design components. So back on that collaboration point, it allows everyone to put their strengths into the planning of the project at the right time. The other thing it can do is allow procurement, like I mentioned a bit earlier. It can allow procurement and market testing so that essentially when different ideas are getting floated around, that it's not always a guaranteed thing that idea is going to come to fruition. If you market test it early in the piece, it can really eliminate the things that aren't going to work and sort of really provide focus on what's going to give you the best value. On that value management, usually there's a brief that a builder can look at and go, well, from our experience, this and this could be done a little bit differently. You'll still get the same outcome, but essentially we can make it either cheaper, and not cheaper in terms of quality, cheaper in terms of a better value managed, a smarter solution. And what goes with that's obviously usually some efficiencies in terms of timing as well. So what it does is allows projects to form a bit of contingency. So what I'm just going to make very clear about an ECI model, it all works. It works very well, but there are a few prerequisites that are fairly necessary for it to work. And the ECI case study that I'm going to show you shortly was a very good example of ticking the boxes in terms of the prerequisites. So one of the main things, people have got to be open to that collaborative type approach. It sort of doesn't lend itself well to big egos. You've got to work collaboratively. What that probably needs is a bit of trust and a working relationship where that's not always easy at first contact with a bunch of different stakeholders. So it works very well in that repeat work type environment. And I suppose the other main thing with an ECI is that the objectives need to be set at the start. Like you said earlier, Rob, the cheapest, quickest, highest quality, if they're the objectives, it's not going to work, right? There needs to be a budget set, there needs to be a time frame set, and there needs to be a brief set. It's pretty simple. If you don't set the limits and set the objectives, it's very hard to improve on them. If the objective on each of those fronts is just constantly to be the cheapest, be the fastest, be the best quality, it's sort of a moving target constantly. So we might just jump into the actual, the little case study that I'd like to run you through. Okay, so look, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown on this childcare centre that I was involved in from a management perspective with a local Brisbane builder, Nicklin, who do mid-tier commercial industrial construction. Now this was a project which was the second project with a client. So there was a relationship already established, there was trust established. So the ECI model worked really well. But essentially, what the ECI did was allow us to, as experienced builders, put our smarts into the design. So it was a childcare centre. We'd built childcare centres before. We were able to, I suppose, put our smarts in and basically get a whole bunch of really good outcomes on things that could have, if they hadn't been changed, could have cost more and taken longer. Essentially, the scope of the job still remained the same. The brief was still there. We were able to, I suppose, get better solutions to achieve the different outcomes. And the other thing which really it allowed us to do was to build the job, start quickly and build the job efficiently. And what all this does is creates that buffer in the project around basically contingency. So what does it all relate to? It ends up in people being able to have the time and the capacity to do the job well. And that's how I sort of link this all back to the discussion of quality. If you are able to balance out the drivers, the quality will naturally increase. And that's probably where I'll leave that. I don't want to go into any sort of real stats or anything around where it all ended up. But one thing I will say is that, we all aim for this 0 defects type completion level. We achieved that quite comfortably on that job. So
that's great.
Balancing out the drivers.
Yeah, I like the idea there of almost giving space for quality itself. It gets kind of suffocated underneath the other drivers and safety stuff that we talked about before, which is obviously important, but we don't want it to be last cab off the rank. So if we give it some room to breathe and grow into the project, that makes a lot of sense. So thanks for walking us through it. We're almost at the top of time, so we're going to kind of wrap up here with, as I said, some practical things and takeaways. So figuring out, we want to give you 3 takeaways that Matt and I have put a bit of thought into, and certainly things we try and work with on our customers as well. So the first thing for me is a systematic approach. We can train it, we can support it in that process. And I'd also, off the back of that systematic approach, really focus on the concept of simplicity. I think simplicity is the path to progress in pretty much all areas of life, but especially in construction. And not simple like reducing to the lowest common denominator, but making it simple and effective. And I think one of the key things there is reducing barriers and bringing technology in. That's one of the key things. Obviously, Matt and I use Procore to work with our customers. There's a lot of other tools out there, but just finding that right technology fit for you to actually be able to support that systematic approach. So again, we don't want to have a big idea. We don't want to just have a systematic approach. We want a tool to apply that with. And I think that tool really is technology and processes around that and keeping it a simple, straightforward process. The last one, which Matt mentioned earlier, touched upon around data. I think data is really important. We looked at that 85% number. My opinion on quality data is I'd like to move away from the big stick approach. I'd like it to not be so much, there was too many defects and, getting that big stick out. I'd like the positive reinforcement of quality achievement. So, we have a systematic approach. We have technology to apply it. Let's commend when we're executing that process. And of course, the lagging indicator there is that ultimate defect number or the consistency of that quality outcome when checked. But we'd like to really enforce the positivity of the process as we go through it and demonstrate what's being done. And I think data should be used in that way as well. And I think that will really provide a positive feedback loop back to the people who are actually doing the work. There's obviously lots of other ideas, but for me, they're kind of fundamental ones that I definitely recommend that you look at, whether you're a building owner, contractor, or subcontractor. I think they're all important pieces. And Matt, just to finish off, any thoughts around those recommendations or anything you'd like to add in at all?
Look, we live and breathe this, Rob. We deal with businesses all the time, and we know that these pushing on these points can lead to good outcomes. So I'd say probably just on the simplicity topic, making it simple for the end users. It's all good to have really complex workflows and complex documents and procedures, but at the end of the day, it's the end user, the person on the ground that's collecting that data and is ultimately in control of what is actually happening. So a focus on really making it simple for the end user. And then you said leveraging the data. Yeah, look, it's really important. You know, being able to pick trends, being able to pick what went well and how much time it actually saved, or how much value it brought to the table. That's a concept, I think, that you're trying to get towards that lead indicator type scenario, where you're not whacking people for not doing it well. You basically acknowledging for good proactive work. So 100% agree, mate.
Yeah, fantastic. All right.
Probably
Well,
one of the one of the things I thought about, Rob.
yeah,
You know, we deal in safety. We deal with the SWMS, the safe work method statement. You
yeah.
know, is there an option to have a quality work method statement?
Well, it's
Don't know.
not
Probably
about.
could be something that you could bring in. I mean, they're such similar type concepts, but anyway, all good food for thought.
Good thought to finish with. Well, it's look, Matt and I have really enjoyed talking today. I hope there's some value points there for you, and obviously we're very practical people, so some steps here to finish on that we can apply. And I hope you enjoy the rest of Groundbreak, and I'm sure we'll catch up with you soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.